the skinny or muscular guy that just walked in, do you have any questions?
Yeah, how do you differentiate from setting up a diet for a girl over a guy?
I'll say much easier for a guy. Being a girl, as far as losing weight, sucks. Why? I might be able to eat 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day. As my basal metabolic rate when I'm working out and stuff. And so let's say I eat 4,000 calories a day. Now I'm in at least 1,000 calorie deficit. And I'm still eating 4,000 calories a day. I'm still gorging. I'm still shoving food in my mouth every 3 hours. And I'm at a 1,000 calorie deficit. Now a female, a 5'2", 125-pound female, might only burn 1,200 calories a day total. So for her to be in a 1,000 calorie deficit, she's eating 2 pickles and a baby carrot, you know? So it is, I mean, it's very high for females. And that's why when husband and wife goes on a diet, everyone knows what happens. The husband loses a bunch of the weight, the wife doesn't, and they start fighting with each other. But that's why, because men just have a higher metabolism. They have higher muscle mass just naturally, and that comes from the sex hormones also. And a higher muscle, remember, muscle is active calories. Every pound of muscle is like 50 extra calories a day you can eat. And so men just not only have larger bodies, period, but a larger portion of their body is muscle. But even a thin woman is still going to be 15 to 20% body fat. Or for a man at 20% body fat, he's got a pretty decent gut. You know, so it's just, you know, so as far as for females, it's much harder setting up a diet. And a guy can go from really out of shape to contest ready in 16 weeks, where a girl has to go from being in a pretty decent, you know, bikini shape at 16 weeks to get in contest shape. It's just a lot harder for them. But other than that, the calorie difference, my approach is pretty much the same. Now, what's frustrating is, with men, I can do the extreme carb cycling, and I have videos online there's one funny video of a powerlifter, Dave Tate, who wanted to get in bodybuilding competition shape. And so with guys, I'll get to do some fun things, like on their high carb day, we'll do 600 grams of carbs from complex carbohydrates, and then another 600 grams from sugary carbs, any kind you want, as long as there's no fat. And so guys will eat 3 boxes of cereal on that day. It sounds fun, but if you've ever eaten 3 boxes of cereal in a day, the roof of your mouth is bleeding by about meal 4. But a girl, you can't do that. You know, a guy, I can take so like you, I can take you 50 grams of carbohydrates for 3 days, 200 grams for another 3 days, and then on the 7th day, having to eat 1,200 grams of carbohydrates, and you're just going to fill out and look all veiny at the gym. But a girl ate 1,200 grams of carbohydrates, she might be in an insulin coma by the end of the day, but she's not going to look big and muscular. She's going to look bloated and probably gain a pound of fat that day. And so it just, you don't have as much room. Wish I had like something I could draw on, but you know, the difference between low and high carb days for a guy is like this. For a girl, you only have that much room. And so it's just much harder. I mean, I feel for my female clients, because they typically have to work harder. They just don't have the room to maneuver. Like I said, you know, I could still eat 4,000 calories a day, which is a lot of food, and be in a 1,000 calorie deficit. Some women only burn 1,000 calories a day total. And so they typically do more cardio, suffer more on the diet.
Would you rather them do more cardio or stick to diet more?
Diet, if they can. The reason is cardio is very inefficient at burning calories. A female can go on the treadmill for an hour and burn 300 calories. 300 calories is a yogurt. I mean, that's not much. You know, you're going to spend an hour on the treadmill busting your butt to burn something that you can eat. If you know, you steal 3 fries from your husband's McDonald's order and you just re-ate all the calories you burned. And so what I definitely do with women with cardio, and I do this a lot with men too, but always with women, is I do something called high-intensity interval training with cardio. Well, they'll do normal, steady-state cardio for a couple minutes, and then we'll do a minute where they do really hard cardio and try to get their heart rate up to as close to 100% of their maximum heart rate as possible. And what that does, that high-intensity stuff, puts you in something called EPOC, elevated post-exercise oxygen consumption. It puts you in basically an oxygen debt. So for up to 18 hours after the cardio, your body's going through oxygen at a higher rate. And what's the process of fat burning is called oxidative phosphorylation. And so what that oxygen that does is cause you to burn more fat throughout the day. And so that's a way you can work with women they're still only going to burn that 300 calories on the treadmill, but by putting themselves deeper into EPOC, they might burn an additional 300 calories the rest of the day that they wouldn't have done with just a steady state cardio.
Would you let them do it before or after a workout?
After, always.
After.
Yeah, and part of the reason is, again, at the end of the day, for weight, thermodynamics rules. But when we're not trying to just lose weight, we're trying to lose fat. You want to, by doing your cardio after the workout, during your workout, that means you still have glycogen in your muscles, and you want to use glycogen to fuel your training because it's a more efficient energy source for short duration movements. Weightlifting is a carbohydrate burning type exercise. If you're using fat to fuel your weight training, you're going to have crappy workouts. It's just fat burning is it's a big energy process, but it's really slow and inefficient. And so you want to use your muscle glycogen to fuel your weight training because you'll get better weight training workouts. But what you end up doing then is then you deplete that glycogen, so when you get on the treadmill, there isn't much glycogen to fuel your cardio, and you have to rely on fat burning for the cardio. Yeah.
So, speaking from experience with you, when we have two-a-days, or someone decides that they don't have enough time for cardio, working out, everything in the same session, they have to come to the gym twice for some reason.
Yeah.
I have always read that if you're going to do your cardio before you work out, it should be a good 5 hours before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know that I put an exact number on it, but yeah, you want to space it out because then you want to at least make sure you can get some meals in to restore some glycogen. Yeah, because otherwise, if you do the cardio, I prefer if you're going to do the cardio, however many hours before workout, I prefer it was first thing in the morning. I prefer an empty stomach, and people panic, bodybuilders, males especially panic about that. Work on an empty stomach, aren't I going to burn off all my muscle? And I'll try to remind them, I'll try to explain to them how we were exhaustive hunters, and that's how our bodies are built. If we burnt muscle from a walk in the morning, we wouldn't have survived as a species. Our bodies are, that's just not how it works. But I try to have them do cardio first thing in the morning. One, they haven't had enough time to eat to restore those glycogen levels, so they're already slightly glycogen depleted, so they're more likely to burn fat for that cardio session. But two, especially with the females, and I have them do that high intensity interval training, that puts them in EPOC the whole rest of the day. So for the next 18 hours, all day, they're burning more calories from fat. And so that's what I prefer to have them do.
What's your take on flexible dieting? Or if it fits your macros? I don't do that, I'm saying.
What I say to this is, my argument for this is, if I'm going to make the step to say that macros matter, so we know that calories in versus calorie out matters, and you're going to differentiate farther and say, not only does that matter, but macros also matter. How are you going to say that where those macros come from suddenly don't matter? You break it down. You can say, well, there's this, but this actually matters. We got to break it down. I can't just say if I burn 2,000 calories, I want to eat 1,800 calories. I have to break it down further and say, well, macros matter also. How do you then say that where those macros come from don't matter? How much it matters? I think you have to make that argument. You can't say, I can't go, it's not just calories, it's also macros, and then say, but the next level doesn't make any difference. I don't think you can make that argument. But how much of a difference it makes? Probably not very much. And so anyone who does my diets knows that that's what I do. I give them macros. I don't give them foods. But what I do is I give them a food list, and you fit your macros from that food list. And my food list is mostly healthy foods. My carbohydrate sources are generally complex carbohydrates. My proteins are complete proteins. And the proteins is one where flexible dieting can completely fall apart. So you say the macros don't matter as long as I get X number of proteins. Well, if you got all of that protein from red beans, you die eventually, because red beans aren't a complete protein source. If you don't, protein synthesis requires all 20 amino acids. And actually, it's an interesting note. A lot of cultures, you know, like red beans and rice. It's kind of a standard diet in South American countries. Do you know why? Rice isn't a complete protein, and red beans aren't a complete protein. When you combine them, they become a complete protein. And so, they didn't. You know, these cultures didn't know they were doing it. They just know that they just, if they only ate one of the sources at a time, they would eventually die, or they'd start feeling really weak and sick. And if they combine the sources, that wouldn't happen. So over thousands of years, it probably just somehow became a staple. And there's other. If you look at just about any culture, and you know, go to every culture's kind of got their mix of food sources, and the food sources almost always combine to form a complete protein with each sources. But with the flexible dieting, I mean, the protein is one that really makes a difference, because if your protein isn't complete, it's not a protein at all, because it can't work in the body as a protein unless it's a complete source. And really, there's 20 amino acids. Really, only 9 of them have to come from your diet. You can synthesize the other 11 from those 9. But if you don't eat those 9, you can't form a complete protein. And then also with carbohydrates, a carbohydrate probably less important, but a simpler carbohydrate, a sugar source versus a complex source, is going to spike insulin higher. So you break the day up into 24 hours. We have this little section here. You say I'm eating all sugary carbs at that source. And so my insulin spiked high. Well, now say during that time period, I'm also 100 calories above my basal metabolic rate. Well, I've ate sugary sources, my insulin spiked, and there's extra calories to store. What do we know that insulin does? It stores everything. So any fat that's in the diet at that time, it's going to store those calories as fat. Now let's take that same section and say complex carbohydrates. Now instead of just spiking, they're going to raise insulin slower over a longer period. So one, I haven't digested all those calories in that little time frame, so I'm not hypercaloric. I haven't eaten over my basal metabolic rate, so I'm no longer storing fat at that period. How big of a difference is that? Probably not a 100 calorie difference, maybe a 5 or 10 calorie difference. But 5 or 10 calories a day over the course of a year is, I don't know, a couple pounds. You know, so it does make a difference. For Jane Doe, just trying to look better, probably not a noticeable difference. For a competitive bodybuilder, yes, it is a difference. And that's why I think you'll find plenty of people at the beach who look good, who do things like flexible dieting, or if it fits your macros. You won't find a champion bodybuilder usually that does that.
I mean,
No, that's a good question.
I just see girls that do compete in like bikini, and they do the flexible
Yeah, and
dieting,
bikini you can probably even pull it off also, because you don't have to get to the extreme levels of low body fat. I just think these sports aren't health as a priority. My diets are designed to get you look ready to win a contest. If it's healthy on top of that, that's a pleasant side effect, but that's not the main point. By doing diets like that, you're completely throwing health out of it entirely. You're saying, all I care about is how I look. I don't care if it's healthy or not. Okay. Which, I don't know. I mean, you can argue one way or the other whether it matters, but you know, it's worse things than being healthy. Might as well try to.